Congressman Michael Guest. So how are you doing, Michael? Thanks for being on with us.
Lucian, great to talk to you this morning.
Now, are you currently at the border? Am I right?
That's right. Flew out of Jackson yesterday morning, arrived in El Paso early afternoon yesterday. We'll be down here through Saturday before returning back to D.C. So joining a group of 11 members of the Homeland Security Committee, including another Mississippi congressman, Sheriff Mike Ezell, Mississippi's congressman from the 4th District, is also along on this trip, and we're going to be spending the next several days down in El Paso, really getting a firsthand look of what is happening on the border as we get ready to prepare to draft a comprehensive border bill that we hope will hit the House floor sometime late March, early April. So been a great trip so far. We started off as soon as we landed, picked up from the airport, and Sheriff Ezell and I both visited some of our National Guard troops who are actually on active duty stationed in El Paso. The 112th Military Company out of Canton, a group of about 45 soldiers, has been deployed to the border. They arrived in October. They will be here until next October, and they're providing an important secondary role to our Customs Border Patrol agents. So they're helping monitor about a 500-mile section of the border, including the El Paso sector, which goes actually some into New Mexico. And so we got a chance to meet with those servicemen yesterday to thank them for their service. Something probably most Mississippians don't think about when we think about the border. We say, well, how does that impact Mississippi directly? Well, I tell you, particularly for those 15 soldiers, it impacts them because they've been called to active duty. They've left their family. They're down here serving their country, protecting our border. And I could not have been more proud of them and was excited to have that opportunity to personally thank them yesterday.
Well, I'm sure they've got some incredible stories to tell, seeing firsthand just how we've abandoned any real effort to have a border down there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that's something, just looking at the statistics alone, Lucian, I mean, without talking about the individual stories about how individual lives have been impacted, since President Biden has taken office, the statistics that have been reported by our Customs and Border Patrol show that there have been 4.7 million immigrants who have entered the country during that 2-year period. Last night, as we were having a working dinner with Border Patrol agents, they tell us that they have documented another 1.2 million immigrants who what they consider called gotaways, people that they can verify entered the country, but we were unable to apprehend. So when you add both those numbers together, I mean, you're looking at 6 million people who have illegally entered the country just in the last 2 years.
Wow.
So that's why this issue is so important to the Republican Party. That's why it was important for us to be able to bring particularly new members down to the border who've not seen firsthand what is happening here. And I think that's going to be while we're going to be pressing to bring this border bill to completion, get this border bill through committee, which we hope to do sometime in March, get this bill on the floor in April so that we can start stemming the tide of what we've seen over the last 2 years.
On with me is Congressman Michael Guest. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, text us at 601-879-4395, the C Spire text line. So, what else is on the agenda for this trip? Y'all will be going to the actual border with Mexico. What you got next on this?
That's right. So we'll leave out of here in roughly an hour, Lucian. We're on Mountain Time, so we're an hour behind everybody back at home. But we're going to start off at one of the ports of entry today. So that's going to be one of the major entry points between the United States and Mexico. We're going to meet with the officials there firsthand. We're going to get to walk and see them perform their duties as they are monitoring and inspecting traffic, both foot traffic, passenger cars, and commercial vehicles that are coming into the United States there at that port of entry. also later this trip going to go to one of the processing centers. So when immigrants are apprehended once they come across the border, the first thing that they do is they're brought to a processing center where vital information is collected, where there are medical checks done, where those individuals are detained, and a decision is then made at some point as to whether those individuals should be returned back to their country of origin or whether those individuals should be released back into the interior. We're going to do a flyover later today. That's going to be something I've never done before, but we're going to fly over a large part of the El Paso sector so that we can see the terrain and just actually see, what these agents are having to deal with. Because depending upon where you are on your certain sector of the border, you're going to have very different challenges. And so that's going to give us, as members of the committee, a very broad picture of some of the challenges that these men and women are facing, our Border Patrol agents are facing every day. We're going to visit part of the border wall system, and we're going to get to see the new wall that was constructed under President Trump. We're going to see some of the legacy walls, some of the wall that was set to be replaced, but construction was stopped under President Biden. And then during our flyover, we're actually going to see areas of the border where there is no physical barrier between the United States and Mexico. There are hills, there are rocks, there's water that stands between our border and theirs, but there's certain segments of the border where there is no physical structure, and we're going to get to see that as well. So I think that this is particularly for people who have never been to the border. This is going to be a great trip to really give them a crash course education of what's happening on the border, what these agents are seeing, and then, again, help us when we get back to D.C. to be able to find solutions to this continuing problem.
And what do you think? I know y'all are still working on the bill. Am I correct? You're the vice chairman of the Homeland Security Committee?
That's correct. Mark Green from Tennessee is the chairman, and I serve as the vice chair of Homeland Security.
I know y'all are still working on it, but do you have a sense, Congressman, of what that what all will be in the Republican border bill when it's put together?
There's going to be additional personnel. One of the things I think that we've heard and just looking at some of the numbers, we know that Customs Border Patrol needs additional help. They need additional agents there on the border to be able to accomplish the mission that we've tasked them with. There's going to be money in the bill for technology, for sensors, for various things that they need to be able to particularly monitor the border in some very remote regions. There's going to be money in there for wall construction. That may be a point of contention with the Democrats across the aisle, but there's going to be money in this border bill for additional wall construction, and I think that money is badly needed. One of the things that we're also going to try to address in this border bill is the asylum process, and the asylum process is broken. When people come across the border, if they make a claim of asylum, whether they have a grounds for which to base that claim or not, just them coming in, making the claim of asylum makes it very difficult for people to immediately be removed. They either have to, once they make that claim of asylum, Lucian, they either have to be held in detention or they have to be released into the interior. But the problem with holding them in detention is there are not enough detention beds. President Biden has cut the number of detention beds in half since he's become president. And so there is going to be money in the bill to build additional detention beds, to man those beds, and there's also going to be language in the bill to address this broken asylum process. If people want to come to the United States, there needs to be a process where they apply in their home country, where those people are vetted, where those decisions are made as to whether or not the asylum claim is valid or not before they step foot on the United States soil.
No doubt about it. You're absolutely right. Can you stick with us for another segment? We're coming up on a break, Congressman.
Yes, sir. Would love to. Thank you.
Y'all, this is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo on the Gallo Radio Show on Super Talk Mississippi. Stick with us for more with Mississippi's 3rd District Congressman Michael Guest. Morning, everybody. This is Lucian Smith in for Paul Gallo on the Gallo Radio Show on Super Talk Mississippi. Coming to you live from the Trustmark Studios. Trustmark, where you can earn 4.25% on a new Trustmark personal money market account with a minimum of $10,000 or more of new money. That offer may end without notice. Trustmark, people you trust, advice that works. Member FDIC. Well, with us on the line is still Mississippi's 3rd District Congressman Michael Guest, who's at the border as we prepare to put together a border bill from the Republicans to actually secure things down there. Congressman, I'll be interested to hear. I mean, it must really wear on those Border Patrol agents who put themselves at risk, who have a very difficult job, to see these sort of policies that seem to be encouraging more people to come to the country because they know there's not going to be any real enforcement there.
You're exactly right, Lucian, and that's one thing that we've repeatedly heard is, just the morale among Border Patrol agents is at this time extremely low. They've been tasked with doing an extremely important job, protecting our border, stopping the flow of illegal immigrants, stopping the flow of illegal narcotics from coming into the country. But yet we've asked them to do that job, and we've not given them the tools they need to be successful. And so what they are doing on most days is they are going out. There will be a group of migrants who come across the border. Many times those migrants look for Border Patrol agents unless they're hauling illegal substances or unless they're criminal aliens. They're then apprehended by Border Patrol. They're then transported to a processing station, sometimes depending upon where these immigrants are apprehended. That could be an hour and a half, 2-hour vehicle ride to a processing center. Then they're being processed there, and after a certain period of time, under current federal law, they either have to be transferred into detention, and we have very few detention beds because this president has really cut back on the detention facilities that are available, or they have to be released into the interior. And so what we've seen when we had that initial surge under President Biden's administration, we saw that there was the inability to process these individuals. And so this administration has gotten far better on the processing side, being able to bring immigrants in, quickly process them, and release them in the interior. But they're doing a terrible job of preventing those individuals from coming into the country. And they're also doing a terrible job of returning those immigrants to their country of origin. And so this is something that we are going to be addressing in our border bill. We're going to make sure that there is funding so that we can beef up the detention beds. We're going to look at not the immigration policy as a whole, but just the asylum process. If someone wants to claim asylum, what is that standard of proof? Because what we see is that the drug cartels have now gotten into the human smuggling business. In 2018, it was estimated that drug cartels made $500 million off of human smuggling. In 2022, so just 5 years later, it is now estimated that figure is now $13 billion. And so very few people actually come across the border from Mexico anymore without help of the cartel. And the cartels are not only helping them get in the country, but they are coaching these immigrants on how to answer the questions. They know the questions that they're going to be asked by Border Patrol agents. They coach them on the responses that they need to give so that they will be eligible to remain in the country for their asylum claims to be heard. And if those asylum claims were heard very quickly, that might not be a bad thing. But what we're seeing is that it is taking sometimes years for those individuals to get court dates, to come into court, and for those asylum claims to be vetted properly in a court of law. Many times immigrants don't return to court. When they do return to court, the large majority, almost 90% of the cases, the asylum claims are denied. And so people are using that asylum process to come into the country when clearly they're not eligible. And when those cases are finally vetted in a court of law, 9 times out of 10, those claims are denied, and then an order is issued returning those immigrants back to their country of origin.
If they even show up for the court appearance.
That's right. Yeah, if they show up. And the other crazy kind of twist on that, Lucian, that you and I will find kind of humorous, I guess, from practicing law, is if they show up and if their claims are denied, instead of immediately being taken into detention, where they would be held until they're transported back to their country of origin, in almost every case, they're allowed to remain out for a set period of time and then report back to the immigration court for the deportation process.
And I'd love to know the numbers there.
It's
I'm guessing once you've been told you're going to be deported, but come back in a little while so we can do it, I assume a lot of those folks just disappear.
That's exactly right. And ICE, the Immigration Customs Enforcement arm, has been told by this administration that unless people are arrested for new charge or they represent some sort of violent threat, that they are not to be prioritized by ICE. So ICE is not out there looking to pick these people up that have court orders ordering them to be deported. And so unless they commit some crime or they actually, do something that would put them on the radar of the Immigration Customs Enforcement, there is no law enforcement agency looking to enforce these orders of removal. And so basically they've been allowed to remain in the country indefinitely, at least under this administration.
Is that how much of that is a function of funding, and how much of that is a function, or do you know how much of it is a function of the leadership and policy directions coming from this administration?
Well, it is a combination of both, but I'll tell you right now, leadership and the directives being sent down by this White House are what are preventing at least the Immigration Customs Enforcement from actually going out there and being active and trying to enforce legal court orders of removal. This president, this administration has set forth the directive that they are not to enforce those unless there's some other circumstance surrounding that. If there was additional funding, if there was more manpower, could more of these removal orders be enforced all day long? And so it is somewhat both play somewhat of a role, but the larger role, at least in my opinion, is the fact that this administration really has turned a blind eye to the border. I mean, this crisis has been created under President Biden's watch. When President Trump left office, his last month in office, Lucian, there were roughly 73,000 immigrants who crossed the border as Trump was leaving office. In December of last year, there were 251,000 immigrants who were apprehended along the southwest border.
Wow.
I mean, so you're looking at a three and a half time increase in just 2 years, a record number last year. And in talking to the Border Patrol, we're on pace to set another record this year. And so what we're seeing is that the situation along the border is not getting better. It's getting worse. And we must address it, and we must address it sooner than later. I mean, with 6 million immigrants coming into the country in the 2 years under the Biden administration, the 4.7 that have been documented as having been apprehended, and the 1.2 million gotaways, just if that trend continues at that current level, that would mean that 12 million people will have entered the country illegally under President Biden's watch. And I think that should be unacceptable for all Americans, for Democrats, Republicans, independents. That is not something that we should accept.
I agree, and I can't think of another country that just effectively accepts the fact that there's no border, that anybody who crosses virtually everybody just gets to stay indefinitely. It's just absurd.
And again, this should not be just a Republican issue. This should be an issue that Democrats should join Republicans in. This should be an issue that independents are concerned about. Again, in no country would they allow large numbers, millions of people, tens of millions, or 10 plus million in this case, if it's played out over 2 more years, to enter the country without being vetted, without knowing who those people are, without knowing where those people are going to be living. It is just absurd that this has become the immigration policy of the United States of America.
And it feels very much like a concerted effort by the Democrats to make this happen. I mean, it's not just neglect. It feels like it's a conscious effort to get there.
That's exactly right. And one of the most frustrating things is, people within the administration want to claim that this isn't a problem. Secretary Mayorkas has testified at least twice before the Homeland Security Committee in the last 2 years. And both times that I've had the opportunity to question him, he has told us and told Congress and the American public that the border is secure, that there's no crisis. And even when presented with factual data that show the amount of illegal narcotics that are flowing into the country, showing the amount of immigrants that have been apprehended, he will still tell you that he believes that our border is secure. And I'll just tell you that could not be further from the truth.
No doubt about it. Congressman Guest, thank you for being with us. Thank you for everything you're doing to secure our border and for being a great congressman. Y'all, we'll be back after this with more of the Paul Gallo Show on Super Talk, Mississippi.